All right, so welcome everyone to the very last session of the Wooclap Education Summit 2021, hosted by Wooclap. So for those of you who haven't been in any sessions so far, the Wooclap Education Summit is an international online event that lasts one day with 16 live sessions in 3 languages, French, English, and Spanish. So this year we've got more than 30 speakers and over 1,000 participants. And the aim of the Wooclap Education Summit is to bring together teachers, EdTech innovators, and experts from all over the world to discuss current and future issues in education and to compare our point of views. So thank you all for coming today. I'm Marianne, I'm a key account manager at Wooclap. And for those of you who don't know Wooclap, we are an EdTech company that develops 2 tools. So the first one being Wooclap, obviously, and it's an online platform with 15 different question types, which allows teachers to interact and measure the comprehension rates of their students. We also have another platform, which is called Wooflash, that allows teachers to follow the progress of their students and to accompany them during their revisions. So we integrate into different LMS, such as Moodle or Canvas. And today, more than 500,000 teachers around the world are using our platforms, whether in the classroom, remotely, or even asynchronously. So today I have the pleasure of introducing Sarah Wright, the lead of Technology Enhanced Learning at Edge Hill University, who will be leading this webinar. So without further ado, Sarah, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, good evening. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. So I want to talk to you about play today. And I called my talk Now Press Play for lots of reasons. Think about what our students have been through over the last 12 months. They've learned to experience education on demand, where they're pressing a button and they've got access to a lecture or a lesson, where they're logging into a screen and they can see their classmates, they can see you as the educator. So we've taken a much more collaborative, collegial, almost taking the principles of camaraderie into education over the past 12 months. What do we do now? Do we row back from it? Do we carry on? That's some of the things that I want to talk to you about this afternoon. So I'm from Edge Hill University, and I'm not going to tell you much more about it. So I am in the UK, but I would like you to tell me on the map where you think Edge Hill is, please. Can you tell me on the map where you think Edge Hill is? Hello from Luxembourg and Berlin. Lovely. I'm so impressed with how international this conference is. And I've stopped the question. That's why we're not doing that. Okay, I've given you the answer straight away. It's been a long day, folks. We are here. So we are in the northwest of England in a tiny little market town, but we are actually one of the UK's biggest trainers of teachers. So we're one of the biggest faculties for initial teacher education. So for me, integrating play into learning is really, really important. It's something that I want my future teachers to take with them into their own classrooms. But what does it look like for you? Can you let me know in your setting what you think play is? What does play mean to you? Is it nothing? Is it something? Let me know. What does play mean to you? Put any word you like. Learning, excellent. Board games, okay. Daily learning, training, fun, excellent. So lots of different ideas here. I love the fact that fun's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's really important. Brain picking, what an excellent idea. That's really, really good. Video games have a great place in learning. So there's some great answers there. Thank you very, very much. But when we're thinking about higher education, or even when we're thinking about secondary education, so when children go to high school, play suddenly becomes a bit of a dirty word. Play is something that younger children do. Play is something that doesn't belong in academia or where serious things like exams are involved. But actually, it does. Play plays a huge part of that. And I'm going to explore a few reasons why I think that is. So we know from the last 5 years, let alone the last really intense 12 months that we've had, that learning contexts are changing really, really dynamically. And actually, we're experiencing what some research would call third space learning. So those pockets of thinking, of learning, of retrieval, of revisiting that are actually happening outside of the classroom. So we're moving away from lecture seminar, we're moving away from the traditional hour-long lesson. Can you tell me, in your setting, what kind of wider context do you use with learning and teaching? What do you use? Have you got a third space for learning? So somewhere outside of your classroom, outside of those formal structures where you think learning happens. Perusal, sports, interesting. Walking, oh, I love that. We do some scholarship walks with our students where we'll walk and talk as we do a tutorial. It's so important. Cultural events, brilliant. They always bring learning in. Excellent. Theatre or cinema, definitely. What about spaces like social media? What about spaces like informal conversations that just happen? That informality in learning is helping students to experience that learning just doesn't become contained in four walls anymore, that actually it can happen anywhere and everywhere. And we've really seen that skyrocket in the last 5 years. There's been a real meteoric rise. So we're dealing with learners who are used to the mobility, the accessibility, and the instant nature of on-demand services. You know, when's the last time you got out a physical map when you got lost? We've got everything in the power of our hands right now. So what we want to do is harness that dynamic approach to learning and teaching and pull that into our teaching spaces, whether that's an online classroom, 15 children down in reception, or whether you've got 300 students in a lecture hall. Really, really important. Now, we know that polling systems, that questions, that response systems have actually been around for a pretty long time now, around the turn of the millennium. But what we are seeing is research is increasingly telling us how important that opportunity to engage in your learning is, how important those connections that can be made via your smartphone that's on your lap in your lecture or your laptop when you're at home are absolutely imperative, particularly when you've got large numbers in a class. So if I'm stood in front of my 337 student teachers, I want to make connections with them. And things like Wooclap can help me do that because they're having an opportunity to participate. They're having an opportunity to contribute. But I'd argue that it's just the same in a classroom of 30. We're dealing with children now who've been through a really turbulent time, and some of them are coming back to the classroom with social issues. So using things like Wooclap really helps me enable and empower my children with a voice in the classroom without them feeling on the spot or uncomfortable. And what approaches like this do is they create social ties. They help to build this social capital between an educator and a learner that research has shown improves practice. So when we build those bonds, when we help students to feel a part of their own learning journey, and when we help them to own it, it becomes a collegial space, it becomes a space that they care about, and it absolutely becomes a playful space. Using Wooclap helps me gain answers from my students without that pressure of getting something wrong. It adds almost the principles of gamification. I'm allowing students to have that voice with low stakes, with no pressure, and with absolutely no opportunity to fail and feel bad about it. So it's vital. And we know that means that our relationships, that our resources, and that our context are absolutely vital for maintaining those social ties, for developing those ties. So before I can be playful with my students, before I can show them what it means to engage in a collaborative and a collegiate way, I've got to explain the rationale to them. And it's really interesting when you send out a question on Wooclap and you ask your students about the pedagogy that you've just used. Why have I done it like that? Why have I not asked you to put your hands up? They always talk about how it makes them feel in the classroom, how it gives them a voice that they're comfortable using whenever they like. Now, we know as educators that we have to be reflexive, that we are constantly changing plans, changing approaches, doing things on the go that are just part and parcel of being in front of a live classroom. When's the last time you experienced that? Let me know, please. When's the last time you experienced something like this where you just want a response from your class or you change tack in your learning and teaching? When have you experienced a reflexive moment? Let's see what we've got. Last week, see, they happen all the time. Absolutely. It's who we are as educators. You know, never mind a plan B, we go right the way through the alphabet. We've always got lots of plans. Yeah, now that's a very interesting point. Trying to deviate, but returning to the goal. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but great answers. Thank you very much. So BT did some really interesting research just around 2006 on the agile teacher. And BT has this really interesting analogy of a lesson or a lecture or a seminar being ballistic. So we sit as an educator and we plan every move that we're going to make. We anticipate what our pupils are going to say and do, and we try to guide and coach them through to their learning goals. But actually, that missile can go off on all sorts of different trajectories. And it's about us understanding how and when we can use question-driven instruction to really support the structure in our learning and teaching. So as one of our colleagues said in the last question, getting back on track, getting those quick temperature takes with formative assessment, helping you to see exactly where your class are and where you want to shepherd them to next. And it goes back to really simple language. We can either have students who are passive in the classroom, who are experiencing a broadcast, or who are, you know, we're thinking about Ferrero, where we're tipping their heads open and filling them with knowledge. Actually, what we want is we want them to be active in the classroom. And the research will show that using something like Wooclap actually increases students' opportunities for self-determination, for them to understand how and when they can input on your learning and teaching. And then it becomes theirs, then it becomes owned. So when we are reactive educators, when we practice reactive teaching, we are going off-piste. We are taking a much more divergent approach to learning and teaching, and we're building on the answers that our students give to us, but in real time. Now, I'm sure you've all experienced having a lag in your marking, and actually by the time you get to grade something, the moment has passed. Allowing us as educators to have that real-time formative feedback empowers us to be able to build on the thinking of our students. So I'd like to tell me, is there a time when you have empowered your students by using their responses? How have you built on their work to help them see that they are part of your learning and teaching journeys? How do you incorporate their responses? I always think of small children, and they basically see being on the board or on the panel at the front of the classroom as being a celebrity. It really drives them. It's the same for university age students. proud, brilliant. People do it as much as possible. Absolutely repeating those questions, breaking them down. And praise is so important, isn't it? We get an instant opportunity to praise our pupils and show them that they are with us on that learning journey. Really, really important. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was actually social scholarship. So we have now got this cloud of technology where we can pull things down and utilize and use them in the classroom. And this element of social scholarship, this element of creating connections, allows us to be so much more playful in the classroom. And I'd like to leave you with one final question. This research showed that human practice is being fundamentally changed by the way in which we use technology. I'd like to have a think about these statements and let them percolate, let them sit for a little while, and think about how technology has helped you and your students in these areas. Thank you so much for listening to me and for your participation. And I am more than happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah, for these very interesting insights. So we can now open the floor for questions. And I see that we already had one question in the chat. So someone was asking about your references, but I saw that you had them on your slides.
Yeah, I can share all of the references. There's some really interesting papers there.
So what I can suggest for this question is that you could activate the show slides on the participant's device asynchronously, and then the audience, when they connect to the slide, to the link, they would be able to see your slide and then refer.
No problem at all. I can do that, no problem.
All right, perfect. I don't see any other questions so far, so if the audience would like to ask some more, feel free, because we still have a lot of time, so don't be shy.
Lovely to see such an international audience. Fantastic.
Yeah. All right, so we have a question here from Annalise asking, do you think that game-based learning will also be at the heart of the program at universities?
I think game-based learning is really important, but gamification is actually quite dangerous, because some people will see gamification as constant competition, constantly focusing on attainment only. Are you at the top of the chart? Did you finish first? When actually what we want to do is step back and look at the playful elements of gamification and then the progression through those. So helping students to recognize even the tiniest steps of progress that they've made. So for example, putting up a research paper on the screen and asking them to identify the key points and then tell me how confident they are. Gamification absolutely has a place, but I think it's got a long way to go yet.
Thank you for your answer. If anyone else has any questions, don't hesitate. I see that some people are typing, so we might have some questions coming in. Here's a question from Fernando. So do you use this type of approach with what frequency? So with what frequency, do you use this approach?
This is absolutely intrinsically my ethos. It's my philosophy for education. I think coming from teaching 8-year-olds to then going into a university where we can have anyone from 18 right the way through the age range. For me, learning is all about engagement. And I know how to get knowledge into students. I know how to help them apply it, but I've got to use that hook. I've got to have them with me on the journey. So by having that enthusiasm and energy and taking playful approaches, I want to create experiences where my students feel excited to participate.
I see. And we have here another question from Eloise asking, how do you make the balance between encouraging engagement through gaming and competition?
Really, really excellent question. So it's always important to praise and to acknowledge when people have done really well, but it's also really good to acknowledge when people have made progress. So for example, I worked in a school last year where children, so these were 10-year-olds, took a 10-word spelling test every week. and the school asked for them to read out their score. And you can imagine that you've got some students who 10 out of 10 every week, proud as punch. You've got others where it's 2. So in that scenario, it's about changing language. So rather than actually giving me their score, I asked them to respond with woohoo if they thought they'd done really well, progress if they'd made small steps, or working on it if they hadn't. And I then actually applied the same kind of tactics with my university students, who really appreciated the opportunity to tell me that they'd made progress without constantly being in that competitive mode.
Right. And how does that work in practice, the competitive mode in the classroom?
Again, using technology. So being able to use Wooclap and it being anonymous, being able to show a scenario on the screen where students can actually see where they sit in a field of things. So whether it's a confidence scale, or I'm asking them to tell me where they're up to with an assignment, letting them know that they're quite usually not on their own, that other people are in the same scenario, really supports them, I think.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your answer. I will check in the questions. I think there is one more. All right. So we have here a question from Martin Lewis asking, do you see a possibility of adapting video-based questions to be more engaging?
Yes, definitely. Video is something that I worry about. I think that a lot of educators see video as being active learning, as being interesting, when actually for students, it can be a very, very passive thing. I don't know if anybody else has ever had to go through drab video-based training. I remember having to go through one to do, health and safety and things like that. So for me, it's about timing. It's about having conversations with your students about what timing works for them. So understanding their kind of cognitive load, if you like, and understanding how long they watch for. So using analytics to see when your students switch off is a really good starting point. And then actually going back to that dialogic approach and opening the floor to your students and saying, I made you a 10-minute video for this lecture and there were questions throughout, but most of you stopped watching at 3 minutes 39. How do we do this? Is it better to flip the questions first and then the video? So I think it's an excellent question. And I think it's all about dialogue.
Right, that makes sense. Thank you. I think someone else is typing, so we might be waiting for another question just now.
No problem. They're great questions.
All right, so here it comes. So still from Eloise Capet. So how much time does it take you to design your instructions?
As in my slides?
I assume so.
Do we think? Yeah, not long at all. Much less time than it used to take me when I was a new teacher. So I'm a big advocate of universal design for learning. And I work with colleagues across my university looking at how to simplify slides, looking at how to use a more dual coding approach to things, to keep things simple, to keep things easy. Maybe I'll run a session on that people might want to come to for you. Happy to.
All right, see that Martin is typing, so we might have another one coming. That was just, thank you so much, Tara.
No problem.
So it looks like we are out of questions. So if someone wants to ask another question, now is the time.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I will just give a couple. Here's another one. Are you trained as a teacher in England?
Yes, so I trained initially as a teacher who could work in both primary and secondary schools, so from 5 up to 17, and taught lots of those different age ranges. And now predominantly I work with pre-service teachers, so students who are taking an undergraduate or a postgraduate route through to teaching, but we also have more general education courses as well.
Right. Thank you for your response.
No problem.
I think that this marks then the end of this session. If no one else has any other question, but thank you so much for these very interesting insights, Sarah. And and thank you to our audience for participating. So this marks the end of the Wooclap Education Summit. So I hope that you have enjoyed it. And if you did, don't hesitate to react on social medias with the hashtag Wooclap Education Summit. And thanks again to everybody, and have a great evening.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. Been great. Thank you.
Goodbye.